Council, it's 2 p.m. and I'm going to call our regular meeting for Monday, March 28, 2022 to order. And we will start off with the motion to adopt the agenda. And the motion reads that the content of the council agenda for March 28, 2022 be adopted as amended. And we have one addition, 11.2 bylaw added. Bylaw 2022-30, 2022 dedicated gas tax funds for public transportation program. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Berman and Councillor Doherty. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. We have regrets today from Councillor Madigan and Deputy Mayor Hall. Deputy Mayor Hall is at a family funeral and has asked to join the in-camera session electronically and pursuant to section 4.27 of our procedural bylaw. The chair does have discretion in exigent circumstances to allow for remote connection. So I will be granting the Deputy Mayor the ability to join the in-camera session by teleconference. And are there any questions or comments on that, Council? Thanks. That brings us then to item 3, declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations today, Council? Seeing none, we know the drill. If you find yourself in that position, please let us know and the general nature thereof. And that brings us to item 4, which is our in-camera session. And the resolution reads as follows. Whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Therefore, be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to 1. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including town or local board employees, and those are items B, C, and E. 2. Labor relations or employee negotiations, and those are items B and C. 3. Litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the town or a local board, and that is item A. 4. The receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, that's item A. 5. A position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, that is item A. And 6, for the purpose of education or training the members of council, and that's item D. So the items for discussion today are A, OLT appeal, 31 Huron Street, B, IEBW negotiations, C, CAO performance plan, D, council portal training, and E, advisory committee appointments. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor McLeod. Any questions or comments, Council? Seeing none, I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll be proceeding into the Braniff room, and there will be a rise and report today. And Council, we will reconvene in the Braniff room at 10 after 2. Thanks, Chris. All right, Council. I will look for a motion to rise from in camera and into open session at 5:10 p.m. Moved by Councillor Jeffrey and seconded by Councillor Doherty. I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. In terms of rise and report, we will be passing bylaws to confirm our advisory committee appointments, and that's further on in our agenda. So I will first look for Councillor Doherty to please read our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Worship. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home, Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
Thank you, Councillor. So next on to item 6 and the adoption of the minutes. And the resolution reads that the minutes of the council meeting held March 21, 2022 be approved as presented. And I get a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Doherty and Councillor MacLeod. Council, any errors or omissions? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Is there any business arising from our previous minutes, Council? Seeing none, we'll move on to community announcements, and I will start with Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you. I would like to bring attention to a group that is working in the municipalities to the west of us in Grey and Bruce counties. It's called Elect Her Now. It's a group of about 20 or so women with an interest in diversity and inclusion when it comes to municipal politics. And they are hosting a campaign school for people who might be interested either in becoming a candidate in the 2022 municipal elections in Grey and Bruce counties, and also in Simcoe County if you're interested. It'll be each of the 4 Tuesdays in April, starting next Tuesday. It's taking place online as a way of breaking down barriers to inclusion. The group's goal is to improve the number of women municipal councillors in Grey and Bruce counties from the current 26%. The campaign school is for would-be candidates and also for volunteers. It's free, and you can find out more at the website electhernow.ca. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I just have 2. The first is to let people know that the Collingwood Community or Collingwood Climate Action Team has launched the 2nd annual 30-day biking challenge, April 1st until 30th, and the idea is to cycle every day between now and the end of the month. And you need to sign up so that you are accountable, and you can do that by going on the Collingwood Climate Action Team website to do that. Secondly, condolences to the Greco family. Nancy Greco, who is the wife of former councillor Sal Greco, passed away on Friday. And for those who are interested, information about services are posted on the Fawcett Funeral Home website. And that's it. Thank you.
Councillor, and our condolences to the Greco family on that terrible loss. Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing this evening. Thank you, Mayor Saunders.
Councillor Berman. Councillor Hamlin.
I just wanted to mention, as everyone knows, the Blue Mountain Foundation for the Arts is an important part of our arts community and runs programming for artists and particularly for youth, and has all kinds of programming. So they have a fundraiser going on right now. It's called Part with Your Art. So for anyone who has any extra pieces of art that they would like to donate, There is going to be an online auction, and the proceeds will go to the Blue Mountain Foundation for the Arts programming and community artists. And the community has until April 4th to drop off the art, and just have a look at the BMFA website for details. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carrier.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also wanted to extend my condolences to Sal Greco, Josie, and Rosa, but I knew her as Rosie. I mean, I moved in Collingwood in 1978, and I haven't known Collingwood without Nancy, without the Greco family as a whole. And it's going to be a large loss for them, and it's also a loss for our community. So my deepest condolences as they go through.
Thank you. And I just wanted to do a shout out to the Collingwood Youth Centre. They launched the Project Butterfly 24/7 food pantry. It's a food bank that is open and accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for our public. So for those who are in need, they can go to the Youth Centre, and there's a building on the east side that has a fridge inside and foodstuffs. And they had a very successful food drive at the Collingwood Blues game on Friday. So when I went to the opening on Saturday, it was packed full of food. So big shout out to our youth and Lee Pankhurst and his team over at the Youth Centre for this important initiative. That being said, then we will move on to deputations. And Clerk Almus, we have the Hospital Strategic Plan Refresh and Redevelopment Update with Norah Holder, CGMH President and CAO, and Michael Lacroix, Vice President and Corporate Services, CFO. And bring them into the meeting, please.
Worship, I think that they are present. They'll just have to turn their video on and unmute themselves.
Holder and Mr. Lacroix, can you hear us?
I can hear you now. Yes, Mayor. Thank you.
Good evening, Norah. And
Good evening.
the floor is yours. Go ahead, please. There we
Thank
can
you
see
very
now.
much. So good afternoon. My name is Norah Holder, and I'm the President and CEO of Collingwood General Marine Hospital. I've been in the role for 5 years, and previous to that, I was the Chief Nurse Executive and Vice President of Patient Experience for 8 years. As you know, I am retiring, and I would like to acknowledge the positive relations that the hospital enjoys with the Council. At this time, I also would like to introduce Michael Lacroix. He is currently the Chief Financial Officer and Vice President of Corporate Services here at CGMH, and he's been with the hospital for 11 years. Michael will be taking on the role of interim CEO of the hospital upon my retirement and will provide stellar leadership. Over the next 10 minutes, we will be sharing some information with you about the Collingwood General and Marine Hospital's refreshed strategic plan, along with a hospital development update. Next slide, please. In 2018, CGMH launched a new strategic plan. It contained 4 pillars: our people, patient experience, innovation, and partnerships. We also, at that time, developed a new vision that is still jointly shared with our hospital foundation: outstanding care for life. Along with a new mission was developed, advancing community health through compassionate, innovative, and collaborative care. Through an exercise in validation at that time, it was deemed by the internal stakeholders of the organization that our care at values resonated deeply and were embedded throughout the organization. At that time, it was recommended to add the value of inclusivity, the I in I Care At. This was approved by the Board of Directors in January 2018. At CGMH, we believe we are anchored by our vision, mission, and values, and guided by our strategic pillars, which form the basis, of course, of our nautical theme for the General and Marine. We believe that at CGMH, our I Care At values are the beacon that shine from within each employee, credentialed staff member, and volunteer. Next slide, please. So in the first few months of 2020, CGMH commenced a strategic refresh process. And if you recall, in those first few months, that was when the worldwide pandemic commenced. This strategic refresh process resulted in overwhelming confirmation of the relevancy of the Collingwood General Marine Hospital's 2020 strategic plan, current vision, mission, our values, our strategic pillars, and the directions which uphold and which the strategic pillars uphold. The process involved consultation with approximately 700 internal and external stakeholders and a fulsome review of metrics and demographics. As a result of the feedback process, it was validated that our 4 strategic pillars and the directions remained relevant and strong, and only changes to the goals were recommended. In 2021, after a few delays due to the pandemic, the CGMH Board of Directors and senior team remained committed to moving the strategic refresh work forward. And by the end of 2021, the Board of Directors approved the new goals, which will remain part of our hospital's strategic plan to the end of 2024. Our goal today is to provide you with information on our newly developed goals. Next slide, please. For our patient experience pillar, we commit to the following, focusing on the evolving needs of patients and families, and will provide compassionate, patient, and family-centered care of the highest standard. To do this, we will engage in the following goals: improve access to care closer to home, enhance capacity and coordination of services for frail seniors and those individuals with complex mental health needs. Next slide, please. For our partnerships pillar, we commit to the following. We will focus on the collaboration with our community and across the health system for patients to receive a seamless, integrated experience with and beyond our hospital. And we will contribute to the development of a care delivery system that builds upon and significantly advances the health of our community. And to do this, we will engage in the following goals: improve health outcomes of our local population as a member of the South Georgian Bay, Ontario Health Team. And we will also collaborate with patients, families, caregivers, and community partners to co-design the right care in the most appropriate setting. Next slide, please. And for our innovation pillar, we commit to the following. CGMH will focus on innovating continuously and successfully in all that we do. And we will seek innovative solutions to enhance the patient experience, health outcomes for our community, and hospital sustainability while strengthening existing and building new partnerships. To do this, we will engage in the following goals: seek and share innovative ideas to improve service, environmental sustainability, and value across the healthcare system. Use technology to advance safety, quality of care, and efficiency, and plan for a state-of-the-art hospital with our people, community, and partners. And last but never least, the next slide, please, our people pillar. For our people pillar, we commit to the following. CGMH deeply values its skilled and dedicated employees, physicians, and volunteers. And we commit to ensuring a healthy, safe, and inclusive workplace which embraces our organizational values. Building upon a culture of engagement in an interprofessional setting, our people will be empowered and encouraged to contribute their input and expertise to enrich the patient experience today and introduce new ideas tomorrow. We are committed to safety, diversity, open dialogue, continuous learning development, and the education of the next generation of our people. And to do this, we will engage in the following goals: retain, develop, and recruit highly skilled people. Continue to build a CGMH team that reflects equity, inclusion, and the diversity of our community. Listen, focus, and act to support the health and wellness of our people. And this is the greatest of importance and primacy in relation to the impacts that the pandemic has had upon our people over the past 2 years. Now, what I'll do is I'll ask Michael Lacroix to take over the section in regards to our hospital development.
Thanks, Nora. If you can move to the next slide, please. So last August, I think everyone remembers this, it was quite memorable for us here at the hospital. We received a visit from the Minister of Health, who announced approval of our stage 1 planning submission. So in addition to this, the minister also announced a $15 million for planning grants to help with the early planning and design of our hospital development project, which will result in the modernization and expansion of the Collingwood General Marine Hospital. With this approval and funding, the hospital began stage 2 functional programming in the fall of 2021. So during phase 2 planning, which we're currently in right now, the hospital continues to define programs, services, space requirements that will be required in terms of a new hospital, incorporating emerging care standards, building requirements that have been informed by the COVID-19 pandemic, and assessing whether the current building can support these standards and how these standards would be applied to new development as part of hospital expansion. So although the current work underway in stage 2 planning will ultimately determine the size and the scope of the hospital development project, what we can say today with some certainty is that this planning work will lead to the creation of a state-of-the-art facility. It will meet the healthcare needs of our rapidly growing South Georgian Bay community well into the future. So over the past few months, 18 internal stakeholder groups, user groups here at the hospital have been meeting to review and discuss space needs and requirement of what a future hospital may contain. These user groups consist of hospital employees, physicians, midwives, and some volunteer members of our hospital's patient, family, and caregiver advisory committee. So the hospital is excited to be working on its stage 2 functional program in collaboration with these internal and external stakeholders. We have targeted a stage 2 submission date to the Ministry of Health's Health Capital Investment Branch within the first quarter of 2023, so roughly a year from now. The hospital continues to be very grateful to the County of Simcoe for its $20 million commitment to the local share component of our hospital development project, and to our municipal partners of the Township of Clearview and the Town of Collingwood for their unsolicited financial commitment to our capital project. Next slide, please. So to keep everyone up to date on the status of CGMH's hospital development project, the hospital, in partnership with our hospital foundation, launched a new website at yourfuturehospital.com. So this website will be the home of our official project announcement, community forum information, and much more. The primary goal of the website is to keep our communities up to date on the hospital development project, and also to help clarify the ministry's capital planning process, including what happens during stage 2 planning, which is what we're involved in now, what happens in the remaining 3 stages. We also answer some of the more commonly asked questions that we get from our community within a Q&A section of the website. There's also a form for community members to submit their questions related to our hospital development project. So given the scope of the project, the extended timelines required to complete the planning and design process, we don't anticipate project updates will be with great frequency, at least for the first half of this year, well into the fall. But the best way for our community to engage with the website and to stay up to date is to sign up for our hospital development newsletter. And there, we will be able to share information as it's known to us and as approvals occur. So at this time, I'd like to hand things back to Norah to wrap up our presentation. I think you're on mute, Norah.
Thank you, Michael. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. On behalf of Michael Lacroix and myself, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. And it's been a pleasure working with you during my 12.5-year tenure here at CGMH.
Your 12 years. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and wish you every success in your next chapter. And I'd also like to recognize Chair Leslie Paul for her hard work at the chair or at the board level for the past 8 years, I think, and she's been very involved in this process, and I know she's stepping down. So thank you very much to Leslie on behalf of our community as well as members of council. So council, I will open up for questions. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Not a question, but just really a heartfelt comment. Firstly, thank you, Michael, for the update on the hospital development. And I think it's a great idea to have a communication tool available where all the residents can go to get the same information. Norah, I just know by seeing this updated strategic plan that you have imprinted your exceptional values as an individual in the style of leadership that you provided to CGMH team, and I want to say congratulations on all that you accomplished and endured, and all the best in your retirement.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions or comments? Councillor McLeod.
Thanks so much for the work that you've done, Norah. It was a pleasure to get to know you very briefly at the hospital, and I know that you're leaving it in good hands.
Seeing no other questions or comments, thank you for the presentation today. And just know that everyone at Town Hall and in Collingwood stand arm in arm with you as you move forward on your Stage 2 journey. It's a big one, and with your first quarter of 2023, that's the 18-month timeline, so that's the gold standard as far as I'm told. So we'll look forward to working with you on that important initiative, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor and Council. Have a good evening.
And that brings us then to item 9.1, which is the update on water capacity and land use planning study, and I'll pass it over to CAO Skinner. And welcome back. I hope you had a great week on the Rock.
Thank you. I did have a wonderful week in Newfoundland and Labrador where I had my formative years. We have a brief update today, as we have each week while we've had our water capacity issues in flight. Next slide, please. The reason that we do these updates weekly is that Council felt it very important that until our interim control bylaw is lifted, that we include updates on a number of items that they specified and that are up on the slide right now. And we have endeavored to update those as the weeks go by, things like exemption requests, building activity, remaining water supply, and the like. Next slide, please. So the situation, we're moving through the situation, and there are some updates, and there's one approval on the docket this evening related to a servicing capacity allocation policy. But generally, the situation has been that if we continue to grow at the rate that Collingwood has been growing, we became aware early last year and made Council aware that we had some water constraint issues, and Council has been very proactive and very transparent in directing staff to seek further capacity and manage the remainder of the capacity that we do have. Council was not aware of this situation until it was brought forward to them at that date in the first portion of the past year. Council has used an interim control bylaw as recommended by staff to temporarily and transparently pause development for all folks who were looking to build in Collingwood, such that we could grow as a complete community. And as part of that approach, we've been able to recommend a consistent exemption process. And through that process, in the past year, all of the ready-to-go development applications were reviewed with a different lens than we had previously used. However, we were very pleased that the ready-to-go development applications were able to continue. And if, in fact, you have a residential renovation or addition, it's a high likelihood that that can also continue, as well as some changes of use. So please talk to our building or planning departments if you wish to move forward with a project in Collingwood, particularly any that may relate to things like affordable housing or additional units. With our chlorine currently maximized and some new ultraviolet expected in the current plant, we are getting more near to the capacity that we would need to meet our expected growth. However, we're not there, and our target is to have the plant expanded at the end of 2025 or early 2026. Next slide. First, the water capacity update. Next slide. So we have recently worked through all of the issues that were identified in the new Tecumseh and Collingwood water supply agreement. So we're continuing to work through that. It says this week, but the next significant meeting is actually the week after. We're down to 3 significant issues that we hope to be able to work through and bring forward the proposed agreement to both councils in the near future. The plant expansion continues to go well. The Drinking Water Works permit has been amended to incorporate the new ultraviolet proposed for the current plant. So that is really wonderful news. Thank you to MECP and those who worked hard on that. Our ultraviolet equipment fabrication is underway. The tender to install that has been issued, and we have some pre-qualified general contractors who are bidding on that, and are also eventually will be eligible to bid on the large plant expansion, the new plant expansion piece as well. And we're still working through some consultant recommendations related to the third-party review of the chlorine addition. Next slide, please. There's been no change to the schedule that we previously walked through in some detail with council, so we are generally on track for that. The finalized agreement with New Tecumseh says winter 21-22, and I think we're just stepping past that, but that's the only item at this time that is in some risk. I think the rest are remain on track. Next slide, please. The remaining water supply is summarized here. Until the ultraviolet in the existing plant is installed, we have 489 single development units available in the winter. There's a small change to that number based on some recent exemptions approved at council. I believe it's about 3 SDUs or so that were used up recently. After the interim UV is installed, year-round we will have 1,280 equivalent single dwelling units remaining, plus any factor of safety that's also been set aside currently and potentially as the plant is becoming closer to completion, we may be able to use some of the factor of safety in a responsible, transparent approach, able to allocate that capacity as well, or some of that capacity as well. And there were some recent reports to council on options for that allocation in the coming years. Next slide, please. We have had an exemption process. The deadline for exemptions has now passed. However, if afterwards, and we hope soon, water will be managed according to the recommendations of the servicing capacity allocation policy that council will make a decision on this evening. If you have an exemption, please proceed through the building and planning processes, and we'd be pleased to have your project constructed in the community. If you have not been granted an exemption, there's no reason that planning applications can't continue to work through the review process, but the process includes not bringing those planning decisions to council for you to move to the next step until we either open a future exemption approach or we finalize and remove the interim control bylaw, which we hope will be a step to come in the coming month. Next slide, please. With respect to the land use planning policy study, next slide, the study is complete, and we are now looking to implement the next steps. So we are just at the very end of this process, and there's been a small change to the graphic at the bottom of the slide, which basically says that this allocation policy is nearing completion, and the subsequent to that, after the end of the interim control bylaw, we also have an update to the official plan that would be incorporated with that official plan update as it moves forward, hopefully through this summer 2022. Next slide. So we have now on the March 28th council today, and you'll see the items that are on the agenda that have been dealt with at committee and are coming forward to council, including the policy and the temporary membranes report. And we're just at the almost at the end of the zoning bylaw amendment appeal period. So we'd hope to move forward with ending the interim control bylaw, pending that those two come to an end in the short term. Next slide. That's the end of the update for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CAO. Council, any questions or comments on the presentation tonight? Councillor Carrier.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the CAO. So we met today at 2, and I've not seen the presentation. Because council's changed their meeting time, is it possible to get this, let's say, by noon? So there's an opportunity to review that presentation before we meet at 2 o'clock? Is that an unreasonable request?
CAO.
Thank you. Through you. No, that's not an unreasonable request. This is a routine update, and I think we could get it out to you in time so that you can review it in advance.
Thank you. My second question is that the water supply negotiations with New Tecumseh, has council been briefed on that, let's say, in the last 12 months? And I say that because I'm new and I haven't been briefed, and it would be nice to get a briefing before I see the, let's say, the final agreement that you present to council.
Through the chair, yes, we have spoken to council several times in camera through July and I believe September of the past year, possibly October. I'd have to go back and look at the records, but council provided some direction to staff around the type of agreement that they would the type of agreement that they would like to see made, and then staff have since that time been working to produce a draft that can come back to both councils for their review.
And through you to the mayor, or to your worship, I'm sorry, is there a way for me to get a briefing on this so that, like, I know you've had a briefing in camera. I don't have going to go in camera by myself, but I would appreciate an update privately so that I can understand where we are and what to expect.
Sure. We'd be happy to set that up, just so it's clear that when council has met with staff in camera, we have set out the parameters of an agreement that we would be prepared to look at.
Thank you.
Those have been communicated to New Tech, and we're pushing forward to get that done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Council, any other questions or comments? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Saunderson, to CAO Skinner, I just want to make sure that it is understood that these updates are very, very appreciated. I know that they are a pain in your posterior, but I know that I think it's an important thing, and I look very much forward to the next, I'm hoping, a few weeks when they will no longer be necessary.
Thank you. Unless there's any other questions or comments, I'm going to move on to then Standing Committee Report, the Development Operations Services meeting of March 14, 2022. And this is a long motion. We had a busy night and a very productive one. So the resolution reads as follows. The Council received the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held March 14, 2022, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. First item is P 2022-8, Proposed Servicing Capacity Allocation Policy, Servicing Capacity Allocation Framework for the Town of Collingwood, and the resolution reads, be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-25, being a bylaw to approve the Town of Collingwood Water and Wastewater Capacity Allocation Policy be enacted and passed this 28th day of March 2022. Second item, P 2022-7, Authorization Bylaw to execute an amending Site Plan Control Agreement 84 Hurontario Street, the Regent, file numbers D111421 and D112117. The recommendation is to approve Site Plan Amendment Application number D111421 And be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-26, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an amending site plan control agreement between Mont Desert, around bracket Canada, and bracket Inc., and the Corporation of the Town of Collingwood be enacted and passed this 28th day of March 2022. Third item is P 2022-10, authorization bylaw to execute an amending site plan control agreement, 120 Hume Street, Town File Number D11222. And the recommendation is to approve site plan amendment application file number D11222, and a recommendation to approve an alternate method of calculating cash in lieu of parkland dedication equal to 5% of the construction value of the development to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, Building, and Economic Development for the construction of one residential apartment dwelling unit. And the bylaw reads, be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-27, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an amending site plan control agreement between 2241319 Ontario Inc. and the Corporation of the Town of Collingwood be enacted and passed this 28th day of March 2022. Fourth item, PW 2022-7, temporary additional membrane treatment capacity, and the recommendation is to direct staff to engage in conversation with the municipal customers to explore the possibility of cost sharing and come back to council before the end of 2022 for council to reconsider. Fifth item is C 2022-12, Mountain Road Widening Project, Parts 3, 4, and 5, Plan 51R 43339, to be assumed as part of a public roadway. And the bylaw reads, be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-16, a bylaw to assume parts 3, 4, and 5 of reference plan 51R 43339 as part of Mountain Road Collingwood be enacted and passed on the 28th day of March 2022. And the final item is FS 2022-2, expansion of seasonal paid parking. And the recommendation is to approve recommendations outlined in the report, fund additional expenditures in 2022 for paid parking at the Collingwood Harbour and Millennium Park from the parking reserve, and the business case of this additional seasonal parking be reviewed as part of the 2023 budget deliberations. And the bylaw reads, be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-28, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 3-62 for the regulation of parking within the town of Collingwood be enacted and passed this 28th day of March 2022. And I'll have that moved by Chair Hamlin and seconded by Vice Chair Jeffrey. And before I look around the table, I am going to sever the first item, which is the proposed servicing capacity allocation policy. So we're going to vote on the balance of the recommendations. And is there any item that somebody would like to pull for a change in direction? In other words, a change in the direction. Otherwise, I will ask afterwards if there's items to be pulled for questions. Councillor Carrier?
Your Worship, I just have a question of clarification.
Sure.
Resulting from a discussion that we'd had earlier about the lame duck session. So for P 2022-07, because that report is to be brought back later this year, is it included in the budget so that it does not run afoul of the lame duck components?
I will look. Do we have Director Slama available? Director Slama, did you hear that question?
Yes, I believe it did. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Carrier, the additional costs for temporary membranes have not been included in the budget.
Follow up, Councillor Carrier.
Thank you. So the report, if I read it correctly, says it's going to come back before the end of 2022. Does that mean the end of when we are able to make a capital decision if the expenditure is necessary?
I think it would be coming back before the next council, but I'll look to Director Slama on that. The election is October 24.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the intention was to come back before we establish a new council.
So then I guess the lame
Well,
duck.
it would require seeking council's approval to move ahead with anything.
So I'm going to look to the clerk. I think the lame duck is April 19, depending on how many people are returning.
Thank you, Worship. August 19th is the first potential for lame duck to occur, and we have delegated authority to our CAO for acquisitions in greater than $50,000, as long as the CAO reports back to council on the use of the delegated authority.
Thank you. Good. Thank you for that, Director Salama. Any other questions or comments on items, council, before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously, and then that brings us to P 2022-8, the proposed servicing capacity allocation policy. This has been an intense exercise for our community, our staff, and this council, and it has been a sprint. So just wanted to pull this item to give people an opportunity to speak to it if they wanted to before I call the vote. Any questions or comments, council? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And if I haven't already, I do absolutely want to thank staff because, as you have already said, it was a yeoman's task under a very tight time frame. And I think that the quality of the work that we have in front of us is a testament to our people. Had a question in regard to the merit-based criteria. Some of these items tend to resonate more with developers and others with residents. And I'm thinking in particular of the sustainable development and conservation measures. And within that, there is an item outlined to provide points for that development, which either passes natural heritage features over to the municipality or actively protects or enhances the tree canopy. And there's been some suggestion that perhaps the direction within this framework should be a little bit more specific. One of the items that was mentioned specifically was a 20% rule. And I was wondering through you to Director Valentine if she might be able to speak to why we're doing what we're doing and what will continue to be done after this is passed.
Director Valentine.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Doherty. We've certainly heard a lot about the tree canopy in the past couple days and appreciate the question being brought forward. First, I'd like to start perhaps with a reminder that this policy of council is designed to be a living document. As you can see within the what I'll call the SCAP as a short term, just to stop myself from tripping over servicing capacity allocation policy during my response, you'll see that the SCAP is designed to have a 6-month monitoring and reporting cycle and a commitment to review the overall document comprehensively within 18 months of its implementation. So it is intended to be a document that we are looking at quite frequently collectively as staff and council and looking at how it can be improved over time as we move through the implementation period. So it certainly is not static. Today you've got the study team, which includes Nick McDonald and former interim director Ron Glenn here today, and certainly feel that this is putting our best foot forward considering what we heard from across the development community and members of the public through dozens and dozens and dozens of letters. And we did try to strike a balance between the desires of a variety of different stakeholder groups in terms of the way that the merit-based criteria are put together. At its core, the SCAP is a tool to guide decisions on municipal servicing capacity by prioritizing developments that do provide those key benefits to our communities. So it is certainly not the only tool that we have to to achieve the community's goals in terms of sustainable development, climate change, resiliency, and healthy communities. So certainly while we can look at this document over time and potentially the merit-based system to put in more specifics regarding sustainable development, a lot of other important documents provide us with more direct tools to influence those types of outcomes. So certainly we would continue to recommend that we look at climate change resiliency in the tree canopy through the review of the urban design manual, the official plan, and as was reminded to me by Director Culver recently, the review of the tree preservation bylaw. So it is our intent to continue on with those processes and at the same time keep an eye to how they can work together with the SCAP to achieve those very important community visions and benefits. I would like to leave some airspace, Your Worship, if I might, to Mr. Nick McDonald, who is the primary author of the SCAP, in case he has additional comments to add to my notes.
Thank you, Director Valentine.
No,
Mr. McDonald?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any additional comments to add. I would echo Ms. Valentine's comments about the SCAP being one of a number of tools available to Council to assist in the making of really difficult decisions potentially on the allocation of water and sewer capacity. And that really is the purpose of it. If it allows for the consideration of additional matters beyond that, that's fine. But there's a time and place for the consideration of those other matters, such as what the tree canopy target should be, and how that actually works operationally on the ground when applications are submitted. But I'm very happy with the document. I certainly am here to support the document as is, and certainly happy to take any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow-up, Councillor Doherty?
No, thank you.
Okay. I've got Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I would just like to repeat the comments I made at the Development and Operations Committee and to speak specifically to the level of public engagement and the work that staff did in including planning and other professionals in our community. And I think that they all knew they had been heard with the changes that staff had made, recognizing their input, and it was so valuable. So I think this model will lead the way for us going forward in how we engage the public and others in our processes. I thought it was a real win-win for us. So thanks to staff for developing that.
Councillor Hamlin.
Well, I'll just echo what Councillor Jeffries just said. And I also wanted to point out that I was so happy with the final iteration of the allocation framework that almost 1/5 of the points that are available could be achieved through the provision of housing that's affordable in our community, which I think is a real achievement of this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carrier?
Thank you, Your Worship. I know I'm coming late to this. A question through you to the Director of Planning, Director Valentine. Some of the emails I've received, people are asking me, does this policy conclude when the new water plant comes online, or is this the new regime moving forward? And like, are we just sort of, my previous 12 years here, if the application came forward, through the planning department, it just moved through the site plan process and away we went. So is this the new regime moving forward, or does this expire when water capacity comes back online?
It's a big paradigm shift. Go ahead, Director Valentine, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the councillor. The approval documents, which is the bylaw before you tonight, and the policy itself does not have an expiry date. As I mentioned in my previous comments, we imagine that the document will evolve over time, and particularly as we move towards a period where capacity will not be as limited from water treatment side, we can certainly look at any adjustments that would be required. But overall, the study team does feel that this is a prudent document in some form to keep in place even beyond the periods of limitation or related to capacity. There will always be a next limit that will be hit at some point in the future, and the prudent evaluation and transparent allocation of capacity would likely be a tool that would serve the municipality well, both fiscally and for overall certainty with the development community into the future. That being said, it's hard to project forward 5 years in time, and we've certainly built the flexibility into the document for council to amend as it sees fit as we approach a different capacity landscape.
Thank you.
Oh.
Yep. Yes, please. So, yes, I agree that I see the water, potable water, is the driving force right now in the policy, and then as that actually is relieved, I'm assuming the wastewater issue, gray water, is going to be the driving policy allocation resource. Just speak to Councillor Doherty's comment, and I know that staff are aware because we've all been sharing these emails back and forth. I think the public has done a great job of articulating where they feel that there's a gap between this document and where they would like us to go and where they'd like council to go. And I talked about this last week, that it's a progressive community. The documents that we have done in the past are not static. They're always to be changed, but the resources to change them are limited because we all only have so many hours and resources within the budget to do things. Speaking specifically with the tree canopy issue, is that something that can be done with at a site plan agreement, or is that something we have to wait until the tree preservation bylaw? And I'm saying this as respectfully as I can because I understand the comments that there's time and place, but the public is demanding of the elected officials that the time and place is almost now, if not, some time ago. So it's a situation that we're looking to try and be responsive as staff, as professionals. And I know you care about this community as much as we do, but I'd like to kind of have an answer for the public who's listening, and I know they're listening because they told me today they would be. How do we get more responsive in a shorter amount of time to the concerns, the valid concerns they're bringing forward?
Director Valentine?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I would leave some space here perhaps for CAO Skinner to respond as well to this. I mean, we can do a lot with additional resources and time, certainly. And I think you hit it on the head, Councillor. There's only a certain number of individuals in the planning division to move forward these very, very important projects. With respect to timing, as you heard earlier in the presentation, the official plan, I believe was in CEO Skinner's presentation, the official plan is tracking to move forward. There has been a slight delay based on this council reprioritizing another project in the short term, but is looking to be released in May, and certainly does have policies related to tree canopy protection within it. The urban design manual will follow after consultation on the overall policy framework, because that may affect how the document is the content of the urban design manual. Perhaps the tool that may be the quickest of the three, and I can't see everyone on the call, but Director Culver may be with us as well. I do understand the tree preservation bylaw is in his team's work plan for 2022 as well. So that might be the fastest to the post. All that being said, we take our direction from council, and if council wishes to reprioritize to bring a certain project forward within a faster timeline, we're open to having that discussion as to what other projects would be delayed or put on the back burner in order to fast track something that is desirable for this council and the community.
Thank you, Director Valentine. Director Culver?
Thank you, Worship. I actually don't have much to add to what Director Valentine has already said, other than I wanted to be available if there were questions around the bylaw that is in our work plan. I think maybe the one thing I could add is that our review of what is currently known as the tree destruction bylaw is predicated on the idea of tree removals on private property, and it was a motion brought forward by council last year, so it's in our 2022 work plan. With recent public engagement, we now have a bit of a different lens, which we're grateful for, to review the bylaw, and we're looking forward to starting it with a reframe into a tree preservation bylaw, which can have wide-reaching opportunities for impact related to development, especially where it pertains to development peer review and whatnot. So with that being said, I just echo what Director Valentine has already said, but our work on that tree preservation bylaw may be the quick way to get some advancement in regard to what the community is asking for.
Thank you. Follow-up, Councillor?
Yes, I want to echo my comments from last week, that I'm so impressed with the professionalism of staff, and the CEO wasn't here last week to hear those comments, and it's just, knowledge bank is quite impressive. I'm just so all of you know, I'm perfectly clear with you that I will be voting no against this, that I drafted a letter opposing the ICBL as a private citizen when the ICBL was brought forward. I did reread the old agreement, the 1999 water agreement from last week that I received, and I still think it's more of a political issue that we have as opposed to a water crisis. I know that's a different opinion than the rest of you have, and I respect that. I respect that you've had more recent knowledge on this file than I have. However, I don't support the policy based upon the premise that I don't believe it was built on a rocky foundation. Let me put it that way, as delicately as I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any other questions or comments? Councillor Jeffrey?
Recorded vote, please.
Certainly. Got that request. And before the call of vote, I will weigh in on this. Sustainability for our community has clearly become an issue, and it's become a much stronger issue since the election of 2018. And moving forward, we've seen through our official plan amendment that we're looking at ways that we can try to collaborate, to co-create with our developers the type of community that we need. We're seeing from our attainable housing pressures, from our growth pressures, from our cost pressures, and also our infrastructure pressures, that sustainability moving forward and wise investment of our municipal infrastructure investments is going to be a key issue for this council. So I see this allocation framework as being a necessary step in that process. We know it's part of a three-part planning process with the official plan amendments, the zoning bylaw amendments, and now the allocation framework, that we can work with developers to make sure that we're getting the type of growth we need in our community to make a complete community and a sustainable community and a resilient one moving forward. I take Councillor Carrier's comments, but I disagree with him respectfully on that. I think this was an issue that was waiting to happen, and we need the tools moving forward to make sure that we are creating the community that our residents want and come to expect when they move up here. We have gone through a great deal on the sustainability issue with our urban forest canopy. We're at 32%. That's a very healthy number, but we need to make sure that we continue to protect that asset moving forward. And this, I think, is all part of that process. This is one major part of the building block in a bigger scheme to make sure that moving forward, this council and our staff are armed with the tools necessary to do that. So I will be supporting this, and I do want to thank our staff for this. It came in the middle of a pandemic that no one predicted, with a crisis that no one predicted. And I think through this, we've created a mechanism to create a stronger community and more resilient community. And so thank you to staff and our consultants and our community. Going right back to day one when we met with our engineering community and UV disinfection was put on the table, and that's something that this council has pursued, and that's something that is going to hopefully be installed by next fall that will help to get rid of our summer-winter differential and address part of our capacity issues. So I want to thank our engineering community, I want to thank our development community, and I want to thank our stakeholders and our residents for your participation in making this process such a successful one, in my opinion. And with that, I'll turn it over to Clerk Almus to call the vote.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is again to approve Staff Report P 2022-08, as well as the respective bylaw, being bylaw number 2022-025. All those in favor, please raise your yes card. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your no. Thank you. Motion is carried.
All right, and that brings us then to Section 11, Bylaws and Advisory Committee Appointments. And Councillor McLeod, you have your hand up.
Yeah, you said even though we're not pulling things, there's questions and concerns that we can have raised regarding this report.
My apologies. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I have two. One of them on item PW 2022-07, the temporary membrane, and the other one on FS 2022-02. I'll begin with the temporary membrane question. And first of all, contained within this staff report is a letter dated July of 2021, and it is March the 28th. I'm wondering why this letter is coming to us today as opposed to perhaps in August or September. Through you, Mayor Saunderson.
Director Slama.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor McLeod. This was something that we asked the consultant to look at early in their tenure with us. But we wanted to work through some of these, the preliminary design to have a good understanding of implications of this, of the temporary unit while we were building the treatment plant expansion. And it also took some time to speak with suppliers about availability and get some opinions of cost. So while our consultant was quick to have a discussion and provide their memo with their comments on the need for the temporary unit, we did hold for a bit until we got further along in our design process. We felt that we were able at this time to give a bit more of an informed decision to council.
Councillor?
Yes, thank you. So in the first page of that memo from ACOM, which is, I think, page 153 of the agenda, the quotation is the short-term solution, and the sentence goes on, is to give the town enough capacity to lift the ICBL in the fall of 2022. And that really caught my eye because, of course, this council has been told in every single meeting since April 26th of 2021 that the goal is to lift the ICBL, if not on the anniversary, if not before of the 1 year of the ICBL, so April of 2022. Like every single meeting. This is the conversation that we've been having. And so here's a letter from a company working on the problem where the understanding is very plainly not that. And I wonder if, through you, Mayor Saunderson, someone might be able to explain that discontinuity, disconnect for me, please.
Director Slama?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor McLeod. So I think you are correct. I think at the time the consultant maybe has used the wrong words in that memo. The option of looking at the membranes is one component, right? That could address one of the aspects that we're looking for when implementing the ICBL. But as Mayor Saunderson, just spoke to, right, there's other aspects related, these planning mechanisms and having these mechanisms on the other side, on the planning side, to make sure that we could move forward and develop our community in a way that is transparent and fair and sustainable. So the treatment is one component that if that was the only obstacle, I think it could have addressed that. It could have addressed the issue of our shortage of capacity in the short term. But there are more components related to the ICBL.
Follow up, Mayor Saunderson. I'm sorry, I'm not sure that I understand. I'm not sure that the answer is to the question that I asked. I'm wondering why ACON was under the impression that we would be able to lift the ICBL in the fall of 2022, when council was being led to believe that we would be able to lift the ICBL in April of 2022.
That might be a question for the consultant, but Director Slama, are you able to assist?
I'll try again, Mayor Saunderson, through you to Councillor MacLeod. So the consultant is, I believe the consultant is suggesting, right, that a temporary membrane unit could alleviate the issue of capacity. Right, and that was one of the reasons we went forward with the ICBL. But not having the right planning mechanisms on the other side was another consideration for us as a municipality. Am I still not answering your question properly? Sorry, maybe I'm just misunderstanding.
Well, thank you, Director. And CEO Skinner, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor MacLeod. I think one of the key items here is that this memo was written by our design consultant, who was very much looking at how fast water could be produced. However, we also had, and that's the updates that we've been providing each week, our planning and land use planning study consultant and the items that would fall from that. So through that land use planning study, we were able to recommend to council and have an earlier end, we hope, to the interim control bylaw pending the state of any appeals. And that's the date that we've been providing to council. So this design consultant was looking at it simply from a capacity perspective. If you proceeded as quickly as possible, just with interim capacity, that would be the earliest date in the later portion of 2022. But it may not have been, and ultimately we recommend that it not be the best path for council to take.
Okay, thank you. Regarding staff report FS 22-02, which is addresses parking at Millennium Park, and this particular staff report has got me in mind, especially some questions that have been coming to me in the last few days about parking elsewhere in town. And several people have come to me and said, how soon will it be that I, who live in Thornbury, will not be able to eat my lunch and look at the water without spending $100? And that the plaintive tone that this person used was quite sad to me. And I'm just curious to know, are we looking at putting in paid parking in not just in Millennium Park? Obviously, we've just passed that, but in at the splash pad and every other place?
I'm going to look to Chief Parr. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Answering Councillor MacLeod's question, I think this is just a pilot for this going forward. There was a great need by Director Culvert to look at the control of parking down at the waterfront and to assist his staff to be able to do what they do. And Acting Manager Herod come up with a great idea to move this forward, and we feel that this is the step now, and then there'd be consideration for any advancement later would come to council with council direction to see how far or where we want to go with more paid parking in the municipality.
Thank you. I have a follow-up actually on that as well, though. Well, it's not a question; it's more of a comment, and that is a compliment to our customer service staff. The chart says that there were 2,770 people who called in trying to get some help with the hotspot, installing their hotspot or getting their resident parking permit. And speaking as one of those 2,770 people, I can say that they were a delight to work with and incredibly helpful. And so my hat is off to everyone at customer service and anyone who manages them. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. And thank you for that information, Chief. And thank you, Adam, for your work on this as we work through our parking issues in town. All right, and that brings us to 11.1. and that's the advisory committee appointments. And the resolution reads as follows. Be it resolved that the following bylaws to appoint members to various advisory committees be enacted and passed this 28th day of March 2022. Number 1, bylaw number 2022-21, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Number 2, bylaw number 2022-22, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Collingwood Heritage Committee. Third one is bylaw number 2022-23, being a bylaw to appoint a member to the Museum Advisory Committee. And the fourth is bylaw number 2022-24, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee. Can I get a mover and a seconder for this, please? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Berman, thank you. And I don't know, Clerk Thomas, if you'd like to read out the names of the appointees for us, please.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. The Collingwood Heritage Committee, Margaret Adolph, Jennifer Knight. The Museum Advisory Committee, Tim Garland. Trails and Active Transportation Committee, we have Dallas Marcasse and Paul Cadieux, and Hannah Parrish and Jack Marley. The first two respectively for 3 years, and the second two for 2 years. The Accessibility Advisory Committee is Hannah Keeney, Heather Grassman, and Leslie Bolt.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who applied, and congratulations to those who were appointed. You're joining a very active group, and we look forward to working with you. With that being said, I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to item 11.2, 2022 dedicated gas tax funds for public transportation program. And the resolution reads, be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-30, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of the letter of agreement for the use of dedicated gas tax funds for the public transportation program between Her Majesty the Queen in Right of Ontario and the town of Collingwood be enacted and passed this 28th day of March 2022. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Doherty. And I don't know if, CO, if you want to fill in on the numbers and how that investment might get used, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the absence of Treasurer Quinlan, I don't have all the details, but I do know we received the attached memo from Minister Mulroney with the provincial government, and it is some additional funding, I believe 200 and something and a 300 and something thousand dollar installments that will help us with our overall transit program in the coming year. I don't know, given that it's within Director Slama's area, if she has anything she'd like to add, but we are very grateful to receive this funding from the province.
Thank you, CL. Director Slama? No?
No, thank you, Worship. No, I don't have anything to add. Yep.
Well, it's good news, either any way you look at it. So with that being said, then, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Any notices of motion tonight, Council? Item 12. Seeing none, county report. The Deputy Mayor has sent his regrets, so we will pick that up at the next meeting. That brings us to item 14 then, the consent agenda. And the resolution reads that Council herein receive the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are those of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. And we have 5 items. 14.1, Proclamation World Autism Day, which is April 2nd. 14.2, Proclamation National Dental Hygienist Week, and that's April 4th to 10th. And the clock tower will be illuminated purple during that time. Flag raising event, International Day of Pink, and that will be raised on April 13th, this upcoming at 4 p.m. 14.4, Proclamation, the 30 Days of Biking event, which Councillor Doherty referred to in her comments at during the announcements, and the clock tower will be illuminated green from April 19th to 21st. And 14.5, various correspondence from residents regarding the Huntingwood Trails development. And I'll look first for a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor, and then I'll ask for items to be pulled. Councillor McLeod and Councillor Berman. To receive it then, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. And is there any item that Council wishes to pull tonight? Seeing none, that brings us then to item 15.1, old or deferred business. Council, any old or deferred business tonight? And that brings us then to other business, 15.2, and we have two items. And then I will go to council as well, but we'll start off with these. First item is 15.2.1, and that's the COVID recovery update. And I will look to CAO Skinner, and I think you're introducing our library CEO to take us through this, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The CEO, Kulchucky, from the library has taken some leadership for both the library and the town staff to follow along with the COVID pandemic and our much valued COVID recovery team. So they have an update for council today, given the many changes that have come forward from the province in the last couple of weeks. So I'll turn it over to her. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome, CEO Kulchucky. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I just see our presentation going up on the screen there, which is perfect. Yes, so good evening, Mayor and Council. As CAO Skinner just mentioned, I'm here tonight as a representative from the COVID recovery team, and I'm going to be giving a brief update on the COVID-19 vaccination policy. So next slide, please. So a lot has happened in the last month in regards to COVID restrictions. I'm sure most of you are aware of the updated requirements, but I'm going to give a brief overview of the highlights. So on March 1st, the province lifted capacity limits and physical distancing requirements in most settings. Proof of vaccine requirements were also lifted. At this time, masks and screening were still in place, and local health units could choose to deploy a regional response based on local health indicators. A few weeks later, on March 21st, masking requirements were lifted in most settings, with the exception of healthcare and public transit. Requirements for screening patrons was no longer required, and businesses no longer needed to have a safety plan in place. The province has announced its intentions to end all remaining measures in 1 month on April 27th. Next slide, please. So in light of all of these changes, the COVID recovery team has been taking steps to move into alignment with the provincial updates. These changes represent the balanced and longer-term response to the pandemic that the province is trying to achieve. On December 13th of last year, Council approved the mandatory vaccination policy, stating that it would be in effect for a duration that aligns with federal and our provincial government and Simcoe-Muskoka District Health Unit requirements for proof of vaccination. So again, that proof of vaccination requirement was lifted by the provincial government earlier this month. So our mandatory vaccination policy will also be lifted, triggering a return to work and alleviating staff shortages and unanticipated closures at some of our facilities. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for us moving forward? So the COVID recovery team and key staff have been reviewing the updates and guidance from the provincial government and our local health unit. For the duration of this pandemic, our municipality has taken a cautious approach to its response and safety measures, and this continues to be the case. The safety of our staff, volunteer, and community remains our top priority. So at this time, acknowledging our responsibility as an employer under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, we believe our COVID-19 procedures meet the fundamental components of a vaccination policy as outlined by our local health unit. Our vaccination procedure encompasses the process for supporting the immunization of staff and volunteers, the responsibilities of employees and managers, and accommodations to attend vaccine clinics. Earlier this year, we implemented our rapid antigen testing procedure, and employees continue to have access to test kits at facilities throughout the organization. Although they are no longer mandatory, we are continuing to provide medical face masks at our work sites for employees choosing to wear one, and our office and vehicle cleaning procedures, along with sanitization stations, continue to be in effect. All of our procedures and COVID updates are communicated to staff via email and posted on our SharePoint site, and managers are asked to share information with any employees who do not have regular access to computer stations. We believe our collection of COVID-specific procedures align with the province's response to reflect a longer-term approach to this pandemic. And I think the last slide is if there are any questions.
Council, any questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much, Ashley. You covered all the bases, and thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
That brings us then to item 15.2.2, which is Committee Board Diversity Update. I'm going to look to Clerk Almus, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This was asked last week at our council meeting, so this is a follow-up. I've done some additional research with staff, and the update this evening is currently the recruitment policy for our committee and board volunteers does not specifically address diversity. However, it does not identify any barriers that would discourage diversity. Regardless, all applicants are reviewed on their qualification and expertise. We have increased how we advertise or promote the opportunities, including through local organizations with compatible interests. Provisions in our procedure bylaw also enable more flexibility for volunteer members to participate remotely, and there's flexibility for committees and boards to revisit their current meeting schedule, which may be a barrier for some individuals, such as those with family, work, or cultural religious conflicts. In discussion with HR and our Director of PRC regarding well-being and inclusion, within the 2022 operational plan, it includes a review of recruitment strategies, including job ads, update to key messaging and branding, review of posting channels. This is how our recruitment messaging is presented, and it ensures we want to ensure that it reaches a diverse audience. These revisions, methodology, and strategies will be applied to our volunteer recruitment process next year. HR has already begun to experiment with anti-bias training for interviewers. In a committee and board recruitment process, this would likely include all council members taking the training. PRC staff have also been involved in some training regarding how to advertise opportunities to marginalized communities and encourage barrier-free participation. This has been briefly reviewed at the Unity Collective, and they will be revisiting this discussion at an upcoming meeting. And again, that's how to best communicate and engage participation with diverse communities in Collingwood. Regardless, our annual recruitment activities occur February, March, so we will be looking forward to the work that HR is undertaking together with PRC and making any future changes that could happen to our recruitment policy to ensure it reflects our values around diversity.
Thank you very much. Sarah? Council, any questions or comments on that? We're getting lots of nods of approval and thumbs up, so thank you for that. Council, any other business tonight? Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's along the lines of a comment. Today, our Premier and Prime Minister announced for Ontario, as I'm sure we're all aware, the creation of $10 a day daycare spaces. And as part of this, the Premier also indicated that they would be looking to increase the wages of our early childhood education staff and this is the point of my mentioning this, creating some 70,000 additional daycare spaces. So my comment is that we don't have enough daycare spaces in our town, and we seem to be having no end of developments coming forward now of a greater size than usual. And as part of our official plan review, I'm hoping staff will be able to bring forward for our consideration how we can require residential developments of I'll say a certain size and office developments of a certain size to include a space for daycare. This is a significant community benefit that our town needs, and unless we start requiring it as part of new developments, it's going to be very hard to fit them into the existing development that we have. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to look to Clerk Almus. I've got a couple of notices of motion looking for directions for our OPA, and I'm just wondering if that's something that would require a notice of motion if we're asking staff to take steps.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. I would tend to agree on this one if this is something that hasn't been considered as part of the OP process to date. that it should be considered as a notice of motion and brought forward at the next regular meeting of council.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Hamlin, if you can bring that forward, and your notice of motion next.
Yes,
council.
yes, I'll do that. Thank you.
Any other any other business? Seeing none, I do have some other business. As many of you know, I am a candidate for the Progressive Conservative Party in the upcoming provincial election on June 2nd. So I will be stepping away from the mayor's chair during the campaign, and my last meetings will be on April 19th. So effective on April 20th at noon, I will be stepping away from Town Hall on a temporary without pay leave of absence, pending the results of the election on June 2nd. And so in my absence, I will look to the clerk. My understanding is the deputy mayor will become the acting mayor and Councillor MacLeod will become the acting deputy mayor.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. And further to the recent procedural bylaw change, we would have to have a council conversation and look for a motion on, in the absence of Councillor MacLeod, in the absence of the deputy mayor, who would act in those instances. So we'll make sure it's on an upcoming agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, that brings us then to the confirmatory bylaw. And the resolution reads that bylaw number 2022-29 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held March 28, 2022 be enacted and passed this 28th day of March 2022. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Berman and Councillor Doherty. All in favor? Thank you very much. And tonight I will remember the motion to adjourn. And so I will look to Councillor Jeffrey. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. That was a productive meeting. We got a lot done, and we've still got lots to do.